sample rate is something that a lot of people want to know what they should be working in. And there's a lot of varying opinions because there's a lot of choices. And what you know is people have opinions, right? But what Serban's doing and what John Haynes is doing, John Haynes is Serban's right-hand man, what they are doing was widely discussed in John Haynes's long question and answer interview thing that he did on Gearspace. And I'll link to it at the bottom or in the description of this video. But check this out. All right, this is what he's talking about. When they get sessions in from people, in other words, they're getting Pro Tools sessions or they're getting WAV files, this is how they'll convert them in order to work. Now, it's important to make a strong distinction between what they're getting and how they work, and then what they deliver. The file they deliver is always 44.1 24-bit WAV file. That's what they deliver to the mastering engineer. Because the reason being is because mastering, that's the format they're going to deliver for everything that needs anything. 44.1 24-bit. So because of that, Serban and John Haynes want to be able to control that conversion at the mix stage. They don't want it to then have to be converted afterwards. So they always deliver files at 44.1 24-bit WAV. Now, what they work in, let's talk about that. That John Haynes wrote, I'll convert sessions in the following circumstances, all right? 44.1 16-bit, if they get files like that, that will be converted to 44.1 24-bit, okay? The reason being better resolution in the box at 24-bit rather than 16-bit. So they keep it at the 44.1 if they get things at 44.1, okay? If they get things at 88.2, they'll be converted to 44.1. Better use of computer resources, all right? Because we all like to make sure oversampling is on most of the plugins that will allow for it to prevent aliasing and different things like that. So what the goal here is, they're trying to conserve resources to be able to oversample and make the computer run as efficiently as possible. Let's keep it going. 96K, when they get files that are 96 kilohertz, they'll be converted to 48 kilohertz. So better use of computer resources again. Now notice 96 is twice of 48. So the point is, there's a method to their madness. They're not always converting things to 44.1. If it's 96, they become, they will convert them to 48K for better use of computer resources. All right. And then if they get 32-bit files that are 48K, they're left as is. Now, knowing that if you're going to send files to Serban and you want everything to sound, not worry about any conversion happening on their end, I would deliver 32-bit 48K. Not everyone's delivering files to Serban, but you may want to work in this way for you, for anyway. Something else he adds, I think that 32-bit is great in the box, but we're not printing and delivering files in that format. I'm not sure that pop, hip-hop, etc., that kind of music wants more transient detail. The samples being used aren't 32-bit. In other words, hip-hop, a lot of pop stuff, when they're using samples, they're like lo-fied out, crushed samples that are probably small files anyway. So what's the point of making, a mix in 96K if the whole thing isn't a couple things? Because he writes that later. He goes, there are times we'll mix in 96K if files come in that way, and it's a smaller session, more acoustic style music, songs with a lot of openness and space. Because when there's openness and space, there might be it might sound a little more clear or airy with the space. If it's dense, a dense mix, lots of stuff, loud, aggressive stuff all on top of each other, you'll never notice the difference, is the point that they're trying to get across. And this stuff is kind of widely debated. I've heard everything from JJP say something like he likes the sound of certain sample rates, to other people say they can clearly hear there's a little more openness and airiness in 96K. Take all that stuff with a grain of salt. That's why it comes down to, if there's somebody who mixes using less gear than everybody else, like a Serban, for example, Serban does that, I want to know what he's doing. because then there's no excuse as far as it doesn't sound the same because, and then maybe you won't spend all your time working with files that are twice as big and eating up all your computer resources, that maybe your sessions are slowing down and not working as efficiently because you're using 96K for no reason or something like that. You know, I know a lot of people that think this stuff really matters, and that's why this stuff puts those ideas to bed. As far as I'm concerned, it puts it to bed. Granted, there's other people that are going to say whatever, and maybe, you know, to them it matters, but to me it doesn't. This is what matters. And again, this is John Haynes saying this, not Serban. But if I was somebody like John Haynes, if Serban was my mentor and I'm the one preparing sessions for Serban and I'm the one sitting there, you know, learning from the best like John Haynes is, I'm not going to go against that and have a different opinion. That wouldn't be smart, if you ask me. And John Haynes strikes me as somebody who's smart. So I take everything John Haynes says as Serban probably said it, okay? That's the way you got to look at this, in my opinion. Because you wouldn't be working in some crazy, ridiculous opposite way when you got the best sitting right there. You just don't, that's not normal to do that, okay? So anyway, this is important stuff to know, all right? You don't need to work at 96K all the time, but if it comes in like that, they'll work like that if it's a small enough session, because if it's not, the computer resources go out the window as soon as you try to do a lot of stuff on tons and tons of tracks. So everyone should take some comfort in this, I think, and also keep in mind they're delivering their files. That means when they're done mixing, they print a mix at 24-bit 44.1 that they export from the computer. You know, so in Pro Tools, you got the conversion right there. Wherever they're working, they export it at 44.1, 24-bit, and that's what they listen to when they're approving, yes, this sounds just like, I love the way this sounds, and they send it out. What they're not doing is sending out some other file size that then has to get converted in mastering, because then they lose control of possibly something. They want to be the ones in control of the final conversion process, and I understand it. That makes perfect sense to me. So keep this stuff in mind, all right? And again, WAV file 44.1, 24-bit, that's not how they're working all the time when they're converting to work, but that is how they're delivering files. You got to understand the distinction there. So there's tons of different stuff here. Also, I think it's important to note, because I made a video a while back where people talked about having multiple like master faders at the end, sort of like multiple mix buses. And there was a question that somebody asked where they asked them, do you use multiple, you know, master buses where you put all your effects, for example, on one master bus that doesn't get processed through your mix bus chain with your instruments and your vocals and all that, so that you have control over that separately, and then those two things get combined? No, he doesn't work like that. He works old school. He works simple. And in his workflow, everything goes to one place that has master bus processing on it, like a compressor, for example, and an EQ, and everything gets there, including the vocals, all the instruments, including all the effects. They all get to that place. That master bus, final bus, the end of the line bus, with the compressor on it. Actually, something that you should note is they never discuss what Serban's mix bus chain is. They never really discuss it, because that's proprietary information, and John Haynes, out of respect, would never give away any more than he's allowed to, which is the stuff he's talked about. But this interview is like a book. It's a very great book that, you know, is worth checking out. But these are some things I found critically important, all right? Don't overcomplicate your setup. That's a theme that gets embedded throughout the entire question and answer. Not overcomplicating your setup means don't share things that you don't have to share, because that would, for example, you know, some people like to put a reverb, you know, a couple, like 3 reverbs, 3 delays, and then they send different things to it. So you wind up sending, for example, a snare, a guitar, you know, maybe your bass, or a bunch of different stuff at different volumes to these reverbs. And basically you wind up sharing reverbs in that way. That is not the simplest, most direct way to do things. It's really not. It winds up being sort of this routing spider web that you create. And that's not what Serban's doing. So if you want a big, big, big tip, it would be simplify your workflow as much as possible. This will allow you to break stems out if you need stems, And it will also allow you to just work in a way that doesn't overcomplicate the thought process, which might allow you to focus on the points rather than everything you need to focus on once you start really overcomplicating your workflow. So if you're thinking you need more buses for everything to sound better, everything needs a bus, kick needs bus, toms need buses, the snare needs buses, and then it needs a drum bus, and then it needs, a crush bus, and then it might need that sometimes, but it's probably something you don't need to do if you want to get the simplest possible workflow going, which might allow you to keep the most amount of control. Because the goal when you're mixing is control. And the more you complicate things, the harder it is sometimes to narrow down where you got to go to fix whatever it is. So some people love parallel compression. They do not. They do not use a lot of parallel compression. According to John Haynes, it's not something they do. So they're simple, straight line workflows, just like Tom Lord Alge. Tom Lord Alge's said the same thing. He's like, if I want to add reverb to a guitar, I put it right on the track. Right on the track. I don't want to put it in another place and share that with a snare drum and that with something else because, one, it makes it harder to print stems when you're trying to do it, and two, it complicates things. Now you got to do extra routing work in order to get to your final result, which is it's not the goal. So I find a lot of people overcomplicate things. I personally like parallel compression a lot. I use it a lot. But when I read stuff like this, and I'm always adjusting and tweaking my workflow, it wasn't long ago I went more towards the Tom Lord Alge style of direct, and I liked it a lot. It's just, things just sort of seem to open up for me a little bit. Parallel compression has a way of sort of thickening up the sound. It does a lot for making the mix sort of ebb and flow on its own. Like it breathes differently when you use a lot of parallel compression. And some people love that, but they don't. Serban don't, so maybe we don't. Look outside of what you've been doing and always be open to adjusting your workflow. You got to always realize you could get better. Always, you could get better, no matter what. All right? Keep propping each other up. Keep doing the best mix you can do on a daily basis. Put the hours in. If there's one thing, when people say they don't know how Serban does what he does, that's true. Most people have no idea how Serban does what he does and why his mixes sound so amazing. But you know what I believe is the key to that? I believe the key is consistent effort, constantly improving. It's like going to the gym, but for mixing. You can't expect to just go to the gym and all of a sudden now you lift like Arnold Schwarzenegger because you went to the gym for 2 weeks straight or 3 weeks straight. You got to do it for hours a day, many hours for every day, lots of days, years to get where you can be great. And if you're not ready to put in that kind of time, just don't be upset when the results aren't where he's at. Don't be upset. But if you are willing to put in that amount of time, do something so you could take a snapshot now and a snapshot of where you are in a year, because it's like watching your hair grow. And this is kind of funny coming from someone with a shaved head, but still, it's like watching your hair grow. It's hard to tell on a daily basis how much your hair has really grown. But if you look at photos, you can easily pick it out. And it's the same kind of thing with what we're doing. You'll get a little bit better all the time and you won't even notice it. But if you could do a snapshot of like, mix a song today and what does it sound like? And then mix that same song a year or two from now and what does it sound like? I bet you'll find some interesting results, and it might be the kind of thing where that will give you what you're looking for. What kind of progress have you been making? It'll be clear when you do something like that. It'll also be completely different because as you grow and mature and your mind changes, now you will hear music differently. As we go through life, we hear music differently no matter what day we sit down to work. And this could be great. This could be really great because one day you may get to a place where now you know so much, you could actually use it to work on the things that are in front of you in a way that you would have never thought to do before. Keep this in mind. I really appreciate it. Throw something in the comments. I appreciate that even more. Talk to you guys soon. Evan Jaffe, Custom Cut Studios. You guys got this. Take it easy.